Good evening, everybody. I call this meeting to order. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we didn't have anybody signed up for citizens forum, so we will move right into the superintendent update.
This is a workshop meeting tonight, so I just wanted to, I won't give a formal update until we have our regular business meeting, but I just want to take a moment to say welcome to Josh. So Josh Halliday is our new board member, and he'll be on until April, and then he will also have to run during that election, but we're really, just thank you again for taking part in this adventure of being on the school board. So tonight, we're just going to spend some time. I kind of seated us in a circle of way. We're taking as Jennifer keeps saying, we're taking the show on the road this year with our workshop meetings. So we'll be visiting all of our schools, as obviously we're in an elementary setting tonight. So this is Glenbrook Elementary, and we have the principals here, Curtis, and the associate principal, Brooke. Are here with us this evening, so if they want to share a pride point about their school, they're more than welcome to. Anything that you wanted to share that's wonderful since you've started the beginning of the year about Glenbrook.
Yeah, you're new here.
It's just so fun. It's so positive. I've had the best first couple of days here. Kids are so great.
We've kind of been nice with our school goal with the behavior. We had a captive crowd last Friday, so Brooke was awesome enough as a first year AP to jump inside a sloth inflatable suit to do races, but we had a captive audience, so I mean, we used that to discuss very transparent with all of our kids about what our goal is specific to Glenbrook, which is reducing hands to self, and that we all need to help each other do better with that or whatever. So we were able to kind of do our PBIS kickoff and ask, for the kids to make sure that they know that Red Raider students are respectful, responsible, and safe. And we got to see some really fun races, and it was a really great way to end our first week back. So yeah, super happy about that.
I heard about it.
Couldn't even fit through the door. It was such a big suit.
Yep, I heard about that too. she's like, I hope that you got pictures and see some. I'm like, no, we got.
It's all on Twitter. I just got done posting them all today, so it is out there on social media. So yeah.
So this is a workshop meeting. We're going to really try, one of the goals with the board was to kind of bring back the workshop approach and to not have action at these meetings. So as much as we possibly can this year, we won't have actionable items at these meetings. This is a time for us to present with you on things either that you've asked about or the normal occurrences of the year that keep changing all the time in the state. So we'll continue to just educate and have this time for you to ask us questions around what we're doing. So hot topic, as we know this summer, was a little bit different way that we approached setting district goals, and then worked with our 3D vision team. And we're going to start that process of sharing that information with you tonight. So, all right. With that, I'll let Jenny kick it off.
So every September, kind of as a follow-up to the 3D vision time that we do within the district, we bring forward what happened at that time and kind of what our future plans are. And so we'll lay that out for you tonight of that 3D vision time, and then in September what happens. So you'll get a little introduction to when we include all of our building staff at the building level, the work that they'll do. And then we'll talk about in October what we'll roll out for you in terms of data as it becomes unembargoed and available to us. And then by that time, once we lay out the data as we receive it, then in December, all of our principals and associate principals and other members of the learning leaders will be back to talk about the actual goals and action plans for this school year and kind of that process. So you're getting a preview now. Know that the work that we've done is not written in stone. It's penciled in, it changes, and that's the one thing we really want to emphasize is that we have to monitor and adjust. And so we'll dig right in. We have a team tonight that's presenting. Know that some members of this team, as well as other members of our Learning Leader team, will be a part of all of these upcoming ones when we talk about our 4Cs data, our SEL data, behavior data, literacy, and math. So you'll get some of us tonight. You'll get more of our team coming up in the October, November, and December.
Hey, Jen, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So at what point does this get shared with the general public, or does it not? I noticed it wasn't out there for them, so I was just curious, do we get to a certain point where that then gets shared out to them?
I think it's available through this, so people have access to it in box, but you guys share your goals out, and kind of people are aware of what your goals are and what you're working on, so, but I wouldn't say the specific action steps and plans are out
Like
there
this,
in
this
the public.
presentation?
This presentation is in box.
We'll put it out tonight.
Okay, so it'll be out there for the public, okay.
So, yeah. All right, so, well, you'll notice a lot this year in our meetings or on our agendas. We really are coming back to our why. If any of you follow Simon Sinek, you'll know that he always says you have to start with your why, that center of the circle, that golden circle. And so that's one thing that when our team was at SAIL, we really came back to of this has to always be out in front and center. And so we worked with Eric to kind of design a graphic for us this year. This has been shared with all of our staff, so if you are at the welcome back or at the new teacher, this was also in front of them through that work. And so each of the petals has the school's mission or their motto statements, and then in the center is our district mission statement. But it doesn't matter which school you're looking at or the district mission, it really all comes down to this, and that our why is to ensure high levels of learning for all students. And that's really our focus and our goal. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at Lenoy's, if you're looking at the high schools, the middle schools, it's all about every student and what are we going to do for every student to help make them successful. 3D, some people ask, well, what is that? Well, they used to be called data retreats. And let's be honest, putting the word data and retreat together doesn't always conjure up the most fun time. And so a couple of years ago when we brought 3D Vision, or when we brought back a data retreat, we kind of had a little contest to name it. And this was the name that won. It represents discover, decipher, and deliver. And so our discovering, and really these three haven't changed. It doesn't matter if we're using the SAIL process or if we're using the process that we used before. First thing you're going to do is discover, and you're going to dig into your data. You're going to look at brutal facts. You're going to look at compelling data. In this case, we developed some theories of action, and then we looked at key action steps that would be in our improvement journey. And then we're going to decipher that data. So I think I shared with Jennifer this morning when we met of, for years we have focused on, say, root causes. And we've had different processes to use. And then when the teams would break off and go into their rooms, they kind of forgot about root cause. Well, this year the way that we did it really made us focus on why is this happening, and what, let's keep coming back to why. And the process that we used were these 5 whys. You had to keep asking why, until you really drilled down to the reason why. And then with that, we make connections back to not only what's happening in the classroom for instructional practices, but also then what are those best practices, what are those adult practices and strategies that are going to give us our biggest bang for our buck, that are going to improve the student learning. And then it's time to really put those into 100-day cycles, 100-day plans. So there's 3 of them in a year, and you'll hear more about that from someone. But it's time to deliver on that and create a roadmap of how we're going to meet our goals through those action plans. And so tonight, our team will kind of dig into that a little bit more. I think the one thing that we realized, Einstein's always known for his coining of insanity. And we all know that insanity is usually doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I think that that's where we probably were as a team. We had become very accustomed to doing it the way that we had in the past, and we needed something different to kind of break that and move us into a different direction. And so what we did, we tried to get in the year before to be a part of the School Administrators Institute for Transformational Leadership, which stands for SAIL. We weren't able to. They have a waiting list. They have 2 cohorts going at the same time. So we were part of one of the cohorts, the first year cohort, and then there was a second year cohort. We were the 12th cohort total. But hundreds of schools have been through this process and speak very highly of it. And kind of that process that they took us through, which you'll see a little bit more of, is really focusing on 10 mileposts and then putting together 100-day plans. It also focused on Michael Fullen's book, who is very well known about change and positive change. And so you can see kind of this circle here and 4 areas. And I would say at this point, for our first time together, they really focused on the first quadrant, the focusing direction. And so really being purpose-driven, goals that have impact, clarity of strategy, and change leadership. There was some in the, we did some activities with the cultivating collaborative cultures. Yes, there was some accountability and there was deepening learning, but I think that also comes through more and more as we move through that cohort process.
So like Jenny mentioned, our learning leader team went down to the Dells for the SAIL conference, and really the process involved us walking through these different mileposts that you're going to see on the next few slides here in order to come up with our goals, our district goals, and then create a 100-day plan that will help us achieve those goals. But something that you might notice about that is that some of our mileposts are highlighted in light blue and some of them are highlighted in dark blue. So after we went through this process, we found it really valuable. It really helped focus us. We felt really good about the plan that we were able to develop, and we wanted to be able to replicate that as we came up with our building goals and action steps and plans that way. The challenge was we were down there for 2.5 days working through all these mileposts as a learning leader team. Well, when we set up our 3D time, we schedule that in spring so that we make sure it's on people's calendars and we have all the facilities. We only had a day in order to do this work with our team. So we really had to prioritize what were the most impactful mileposts so that we could replicate that with our teams. So when you see that light blue, that means that's what we were able to replicate with those school 3D teams. The dark blue mileposts were what we also went through in addition to those as the SAIL team down at the Dells. But if you go to the next slide, if you end up clicking in to that 3D vision agenda time, you'll see a little bit more detail around those mileposts. We did a little intro with them, and then each of our learning leaders, we came together, like 3 of us at a time, and kind of introduced each milepost to our team. Took about 15 minutes to give examples and talk about our experience. And then each building team was able to go off for 45 minutes, sometimes more, to apply that within their own building context. And kind of like Jenny mentioned, that was all about looking at compelling data, figuring out what are brutal facts for our building, figuring out what the root cause of that data was, identifying some goals around that and like strategies to support that, and then slowly like kind of getting more and more specific about those action steps so that we could actually formulate that 100-day plan. So that's kind of like the big process that we went through in a day with those teams. It was a long day, it was a tough day, but really valuable, and we got really good feedback from our participants that they enjoyed that format. So.
What was the data? You referenced the data that was analyzed. What was the data source that you guys used?
So we use a variety of data when we come together with 3D because one point isn't going to tell the whole story. We use our district level data, that assessment data. So up until this year, it was FastBridge, is that local assessment that we give, or H&H at the high school level. When we have our forward data results come through, we use that, ACT, pre-ACT, attendance data, incident referral data to look at that, SEL screener data, just everything that we can kind of compile to help figure out what we need to focus on at the building and district level.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This next is just a graphic as we talk about professional learning communities. It really is kind of looking at 4 different pieces. It talks and looks at the 3 big ideas, the 4 critical questions, the RTI pyramid, and then the types that we follow within the PLC process. And each of those 4 will be explained a little bit further in depth as we get through the next few slides. But really it goes back again to our why, meaning all students, or all means all, and then those high levels of learning for all students. And then this one talks really about that, what are we tight within the PLC process? So as we all work in collaborative teams, all of our teachers are part of collaborative teams, it's really taking that collective responsibility for the student learning. It's kind of looking at what is it that we want our students to learn and be able to do. It's kind of that guaranteed and viable curriculum, that universal instruction. It's how do we monitor the learning of the students through common formative assessments, and then what do we do with the information that we get from those assessments? How do we take that data and then determine how do we grow as teachers, but then how do we also take a look at our students and their individual needs? And then that intervention and enrichment block is kind of that last tight, is providing those interventions or enrichments based on where the kids are at and what needs they have.
How do we build these collaborative teams?
So I think within elementaries, it's pretty much your grade level teams. Your special ed would be a team, but they also are included within the grade levels. Middle school and high school, I would believe that that's either grade level or content specific.
So, yeah, really both at the middle school, so we'll have a house team, and that really focuses on the social emotional side of things and building that collaborative, smaller school within a school and family environment and looking, really getting to know the kids. And then staff members that are within a content then will also be in a grade level content team. So all of our sixth grade math teachers will be on a content team, but the house teachers will be on a house collaborative team.
So do those collaborative teams come together, like Lenoy and Hillcrest are engaged with each other in any way, or is this silos by building?
Yeah, in most elementary schools, it's just elementary level. I think Fairview and Lenoy do a little bit of that collaboration piece. And then there are times where we have all of the fourth grade teachers or all of the third grade teachers come together, but that's more during professional development days.
Okay.
And then the only other thing I didn't share is that the specialists across all of our elementary schools also have built-in collaboration time weekly.
Okay,
So all of the music teachers are collaborating, or all the gym teachers are collaborating weekly.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
High school, do you want to talk about your collaborative teams and how they are formed?
Yeah, the high school, generally speaking, it's course specific. So if we're all English 9 teachers, we meet. If we all teach math 2, we're meeting. In some departments, like PE, for example, there might be many singleton courses or art, where it's more, the collaborative team is like the department. But most often, it's specific to the course.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of those collaborative teams, this graphic kind of represents a big shift that we've been trying to make over the past few years, and I think SAIL really helped us to even make that more significant, but it is just moving away from that silo mentality to having more of a unified approach and making sure that we're all kind of on the same page with what we're doing. So at the top of that umbrella would be the professional learning community, followed by, the focus on learning, the focus on results, the collaborative team and our collaborative culture. And within that, so every move we make is kind of something that we're doing together as one, rather than everyone just kind of doing their own thing. So when we spoke about grade level teams and grade levels across the district, all agreeing on what is it that a second grader should know by the time they leave second grade, instead of one teacher having this opinion, another teacher having a different opinion, and then depending on which teacher you had a very different outcome. We moved away from that approach into something where we're all on the same page, we're functioning together, away from that silo mentality.
So as our elementary schools start funneling down to the middle school, is this the collaborative approach we're talking about, right? So we're using the same focus in each building, assessing per building, and then the intent is when they get to the middle school, everybody's on the same page as they come together? Okay.
And so when we're meeting in these PLCs, we kind of really focus strongly on 3 guiding principles. And the first guiding principle is really about student learning. So what do we want kids to know, whether it be a skill base or a knowledge base? How do we collaborate within that culture? And then the third one is then focusing on that data or the results when we're meeting. And then when the second part of this is, or the next slide, and as we continue to work with, and we are always aligned to those 4 questions that Chris talked about, and they're also up there on the left-hand side, and focusing on what is the right work during that PLC meeting, so that the actions that we're doing are highly aligned to those critical questions. And if those actions aren't aligned, then we're questioning why are they on our agendas, and should they be a part of our discussions, and if not, maybe that should be at another time.
The sidetrack is just a question. So how does this philosophy vary from what we previously did? Is there a big shift for you guys, the learning teachers? Or is this just building on?
I can say back in 1998, when I was teaching Algebra 2 at Neenah High School, I thought I worked on a team. But really what I had was I had other colleagues that taught Algebra 2, we might share a quiz that I'm gonna use, cause, you know, I'm a first-year teacher and Don Lehman's a 25-year teacher, you might give me copies of stuff. But really, I worked in isolation. I developed my own, you know, lesson plans. I didn't analyze our data related to his data and what are you doing and having those conversations. You kind of were doing school just like the kids were doing school. And I think this philosophy, and actually it's a slide that I get to talk about in a couple slides down, I think really helps facilitate the collaborative approach of us. We're much stronger together as a team and taking the best of what Nikki does, the best of what I do, and then how could we meld that and make it even better for more kids, and that all philosophy. So I think that's to me what's the difference from 30 years ago to now.
Well, I just look at the 4 questions. They're not bad questions. I'm just saying, so if based on that statement, like, how did you guys do it different? You answered my question. That's helpful. Thank you.
Can I just share from the elementary lens? When I first started teaching, we, like he said, we're very much siloed. When we would meet with our team, we would talk about field trips and just that housekeeping things. We never talked about the learning of students and how we were facilitating that in our classroom and what we wanted to look like across our whole grade level. And then once you move into that PLC process, you then start talking about instructional practices, because the person right next to me, I never talked to them about their instructional practices before, because we talked about housekeeping stuff. So we were able to learn from each other and grow together, because something that he's using might be useful in my classroom to help support learning.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I think final point on that too is, I think data has become more accessible to educators, and it's a little bit more at our fingertips, and I think the discussion around data and the use of that to drive learning has increased over time.
And shift from teaching to learning, because I could have a fantastic lesson, but if the students didn't learn anything,
Right.
that's, you know, it's that learning piece.
And I kind of went back to a slide, since Brenda brought that up, that a lot of times, you have that feeling of how kids are doing and what's happening, but when you put the data in front of it, and if you don't have the data, you're just really another person with an opinion. And where, going back to what Michelle said, that team gets together and now they share. My kids did this, how'd your kids do? Oh, your kids did really well in that. What did you do that helped them to do so well? Because I either am going to go back and try that, or maybe when we split the kids up for our target time, our win time, whatever each of the buildings call it, maybe you can take this group of kids because your kids just did great on it. And so it's also that sharing of, let's do what's best for all kids.
Mm-hmm.
Something, and I'm gonna talk about this a little later too, but like this year, our first grade really took a risk and challenged themselves with some of the data coming in and looked at some different approaches and different strategies and how each of them was having success. And they had 93% of their first graders made typical or aggressive growth. That's the highest they've ever had. So 68 out of 73 of our kids made that typical or aggressive, and that's something that they had not seen, but it was because they leaned on each other and the different strategies that were being used to really morph into what they were doing and finding success with it.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you. Very helpful.
Did you have something, Matt?
Well, I was just going to add that, you know, relative to what Pat was saying, you know, when teachers operate in silos like that, the experience students have can be very dissimilar. I think back to my teaching days, and I was shocked sometimes to find out, like, oh, we didn't get to that essay, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas like through these collaborative teams, they're planning together and they're all in lockstep. And so that really is important to having a guaranteed viable curriculum so that our students are getting that similar experience. And then it really doesn't matter which teacher you have on that team, because what you're getting is going to be pretty much the same in all classrooms, so.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I think it makes sense.
All right, so moving on, you'll see that many of the graphics that are within this entire presentation are repeated over and over because it comes back to those 4 critical questions. And I know we keep repeating it, but that is absolutely what we want our staff and our teachers to be talking about repeatedly. Along with that, and you'll see the arrow on this slide, of that intervention and enrichment. So we have students that might need extra practice, extra skills, more of that reteaching, and we have kids that need some of that push of like, hey, I'm achieving high and I need you to achieve even higher because I want to push you. We had a conversation about that this morning too. So that's where that RTI at work pyramid comes in, which is in that left-hand corner there. And really, that's where our collaborative teams have a say in, okay, just what Jenny explained, okay, what did you do well, what didn't you do well? How did your kids perform, what should I do differently, try next time? And then your teacher teams that maybe need additional help, or a teacher that maybe needs more help with a student, I'm gonna go on the behavioral side. Maybe a kiddo is struggling to focus in class. What are some tips or strategies or tricks that you can bring back to your classroom and implement as a team of some students? And then if you get to that tier 3 level, which is on the bottom of the pyramid, it's specific interventions, it's specific targeted skills, it's specific progress monitoring to close that gap to make sure that the students' needs are being met right where they're at.
So for the tier 1 where it says all students have access, does that include parents as well, right? I mean, parents have access to, the arrows are confusing me, like the universal screening thing, is that the top layer?
So I think what all students means all students get all of the universal curriculum. So
Okay.
we look at any student that needs, in first grade is going to get access to ELA, to math, to science, to social studies. All of our students
Gotcha,
have
okay.
access to that universal curriculum.
Gotcha.
Does that help?
Yep.
All right, so I'm back here. So really, we're looking at interconnected improvement, and when you look at how we grow and how our students grow, you know, in this case, we're starting with our district goals. You know, so on this slide, you can see district goals is the large bubble here. In this case, we're gonna be talking about our goals, and then we have our school goals, grade level goals, and our collaborative teams that are working towards all of that. It's all interconnected all the way through the district to be able to result in student learning. So the next slide would be one of our goals. So there's 2 goals that we came up with in SAIL. The first goal is related to math and literacy. By the end of the 2024-25 school year, 100% of our students will demonstrate growth in their area of math and literacy based on fall to spring benchmark assessments. So again, those are our district-wide assessments that we give each year. So we need to see growth by all of our students. That's our priority. And then we broke it down further based on the data, and specifically we focused on high-risk students, the kids who have the need to grow the most. 50% or more will demonstrate aggressive growth in K-8. So we know that with the right interventions and the right strategies that we put in place, students can make significant growth, 1.5 to 2 grade levels of years of growth in a year. That's our objective through teaching those specific skills to be able to help move them forward. And 1.5 years of growth at 9th to 10th grade. At least 30% will show typical growth at K-8, and more than 95% student growth index at 9 and 10 on the district screener, again, in literacy and math. So again, we're focused on growth, we're focused on interventions, we're focused on targeted instruction and skill building and development to be able to ensure that all students are making that growth.
Is this, Julie, is this measured on a per grade basis?
We have assessments that are really focused on grade levels.
Okay.
And each grade level has norms, they're nationally based norms. So they're very standardized assessments, so we get a good measure for each one of the students at each grade level. And we can predict based on where they start at the beginning of the school year, how they do in their middle of the year assessment, that we can predict how they're gonna do at the end of the year based on their progress from the beginning to the middle to the end.
So at K-8, they take one assessment that we use as our district level assessment to measure growth, and 9-10 is a different assessment. That's why you're seeing that, like, the 2 different measures in here, because it's not, you can't use the same metrics to figure out growth. So you kind of have to write the goal in 2 different ways. This will probably be updated a little bit with language. We wrote this thinking Fast Bridge, right, as our assessment. But with Act 20, we know it has to be Ames 1+, which we're still in the process of learning and getting everyone trained on. So this will probably be tweaked as we move forward.
Steve, earlier you asked specifically just about the data and what data do we use. We have this wonderful system called EduClimber where we get to house anything. So one of the pieces in there is exactly what this goal is talking about in behavioral incident data. So those are the they're traditionally maybe called write-ups or referrals, but any of those behavioral incidents that are written by a teacher or a principal go into the data warehouse. One of our brutal facts was the discrepancy between male and female incidents. And that's something we have to change, and we're dedicated to changing because we have it written here in a goal. So one of the things that we decided, and it was interesting because we had lots of different data that we looked at on the behavioral side, but this was the brutal fact that came out loud and clear, and it's something that we need to address, and in our action steps you'll see later on this school year as far as instructional practices, teaching strategies, engagement, all of those things that will be intertwined within this specific district goal, so.
I think the one thing we would emphasize on this goal too is that this doesn't mean don't write up kids, you know, to reduce it.
Right up the girls' board.
Yeah. So, you know, we want to emphasize that because people might take it that way, but that's not the case. It's like, let's find those strategies that are going to work. And we've talked a lot about student engagement and 4 Cs and how do we integrate that to engage kids so that maybe the behaviors aren't happening, thus the behavior incidents aren't being written up.
Yeah, and I mean, as the grade levels change, so do behaviors, so, right, so things that happen in the high school don't happen here at Glenbrook and vice versa. So if we look at both of those goals, I know we're gonna look at it from a district level, right, 25%. Are we also going to see, like, by building,
Yes.
by grade, okay, so we'll be able to see any trends, okay.
Yep, in December, they will roll out, and you'll see that they might have a slight difference to this, that when they dug into their data, there's still a focus on behavior, but they might be approaching it differently based on what they found as a team. And the one thing is, we had 100 people in that room that day, so, you know, some of our larger teams were probably 15, 18 people, and then some of our smallest team was maybe 6. So a large group of people coming together, putting their heads together to make this work happen.
Right.
And we just adopted the new SEL curriculum, so that on top of this great goal is, I think, gonna help support everybody.
One of the things I'm just gonna give a little plug for later on, so 3D was on August 6th, I think. So our time that we brought all of our teams together, so that was on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday was our behavior solutions workshop, and it could not have been better planned. Like, it just by fluke happened that way, but our teams had referenced all of their work that they did at 3D for some of their work at behavior solutions. It was really just, it worked out so well, so purposeful.
I'm just gonna add one other thing too, because I even heard it today in our 612 meeting. Everyone's a little sensitive about our referral rate going up this year, because we know that we want to take a look at how we're tracking and looking at data for kids for behavior. And so we have to just kind of take a breath on that, because we know we need to do this better than we've done it before. So we may see increases in rates when we're looking at, for the example today was taking a look at kids walking out of class at the high school. So when does that become, is that a write-up? How do we log it? Where do we, but that's not gonna change all of our data. And I say, the data tells us something, right? So, and it also informs us, and at the high school level, it could happen in 4 different places, and if we didn't track it, we don't know that 4 times that something was going on with that student that day. So, it's good information for us to know, but we also have to be flexible enough to know that when you're doing something new, you know, numbers fluctuate, and things can look different too.
Do we categorize things? Like, you gave the, you know, example, walking out of the classroom, and then maybe running in the hallway, I don't know, or throwing something, okay.
So like when Lara talked about the EduClimber, we had quite a few people that showed up for behavior solutions too. So like, in order for us to meet the district goal of that reduction of males versus females, we were able to look at our goals here at Glenbrook, and like our highest references were hands to self. We can drill down to kids, how many times a certain student was written up for hands to self. And so our goal is specifically based about hands to self, but if we meet our goal of hands to self, we'll also meet the district goal, because that will drop the overall number of referrals, especially with boys to girls, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably gonna take 5 years to get a good read on all this stuff,
And
right? I
also, you
mean,
can document it by area too, so you can see trends as, okay, do we need to talk about things at recess? Do we need to reteach? Do we, like, what structures can we put in place, or is it in the hallway? So you get a gauge of where it's taking place as well.
The other nice part, I'll pitch EduClimber one more time, because Brooke and I are really focused on trying to make that. It's like when we switch from PCs to Mac, but the other nice thing that I do love about EduClimber though, is when you filter, you're looking at faces. It brings all the faces down, and you're like, oh, there's my little buddy, like, you know, yeah, I remember we talked last year. I mean, but it gets away from just numbers, and, I mean, you get to see the faces, and it just makes things so much more purposeful when you're coming up with a plan on what do we need to do to achieve our goals. So, sorry, I'll be quiet now.
What's that you clamor? I'm kidding.
So, like we said before, on August 6th, we came together with our guiding coalitions and really went through those mileposts. Lots of really great feedback on how we did that work, having almost like a little mini lesson and then time to apply, mini lesson, time to apply. And we really worked with our teams and brought now our building compelling data and brutal facts so that we could look at what's happening within our specific building and how we can align that to our district goals. And what we really appreciated about it is we then got into the school improvement plan, and when some teachers don't, when they start, they don't even, like, I didn't even know about a school improvement plan. It was this document that this team created that we went over once, and then it sat on a shelf. So I think Pulaski just does a really nice job of involving their guiding coalitions, as well as then, in the next slide I'll talk about later, is the entire staff becomes part and has that ownership for that school improvement plan, and that collective efficacy is so important to move forward. And during our 3D day, we just kept talking about how can we break this down. Before, we had all these goals, and we were trying to do all these things, and when you do a lot of things, sometimes you don't do any of them well. So how can you get focused and intentional about what we are working on? And I felt like our 3D day and our guiding coalitions were like they could just take a breath and say, okay, we're gonna focus on this. And just being really intentional and not doing too much, and breaking it down month by month within those 100-day cycles. Like, okay, we have 100 days, what are we gonna do in August, September, what are we gonna do in October, what are we gonna do in November? And it just felt, and we had lots of conversations like, now is that too much? Like, we wanna make sure we do it well. So that was really great conversations. And then on September 27th, our guiding coalitions will help lead our professional development about incorporating and sharing out what we did during that 3D time, and then how can their teams now support that student or school improvement plan, and so that we're all working towards the same and being intentional about our work.
Kind of going off of when Steve, you asked your question and piggybacking on all of the last few slides. If you look at the thermometer behind, you may remember a board meeting or two ago, Jenny and Allie were talking about us visiting and seeing John Hattie. And him as a researcher, taking tens of thousands of research-based projects and really just analyzing and bringing it down to things that really affect teaching and learning and kids' growth. And anything on he's made this transition to the thermometer, anything that's a 0.4 and above are those different areas that you really want to focus on with engagement and really show the best about how kids can continue to learn and grow and close gaps if they need that. So one of the things, Steve, on your question, self-efficacy is when there's a teacher. And we have outstanding teachers in our district, and the ability for them to help students learn, and they've got the confidence and the tools to be able to do that, and they do it very well, has a positive rating when it comes to how that helps kids learn. But his research really, and the quote says it right there, that collective efficacy, when people do it as a group of educators, is twice as valuable and twice as much possibility for improvement than even just a solid teacher within a classroom. So one of the reasons that we just are keeping this in front of ourselves and in front of our staff is the power and the influence that they have with our kids to help them learn and grow is really, they're so much stronger together when they do it within our PLC collaborative team process.
Okay, before I start talking about this slide, I just want to say that sale process, I've been doing school improvement planning for like 20-some years, and the sale process was awesome. And kudos to our district leadership team for bringing that process back here and operationalizing it in what I would characterize as probably the most structured and purposeful school improvement planning process I've been a part of. I mean, that day went, from my perspective, very well. And so as part of that framework, you know, you saw before the 4 questions that are essential to PLCs, but as part of the school improvement planning framework, our 3D teams had to confront these 5 questions, which on the surface, they seem like really short, simple questions, but they're not. They're complex and complicated, and through the process of that structured day, you know, we had to look at where are we, how did we get here, where do we want to go, how are we going to get there, and is what we're doing working, and if not, what are we going to try to do instead, so.
So like Matt said, my experience has been, you know, at the beginning of the school year in the summer, a leadership team came together and we created a school improvement plan for the entire year. And we found oftentimes, like Michelle said, it would go on a shelf. Leaders were not accountable for that. Whatever happened to come up, we worked on, the goals changed and whatnot. And by the end of the year, we found out we did other things that were not on the school improvement plan. So to clarify a little bit more about what Michelle said when she mentioned the 100-day cycle, what we do now at every school is we make sure that our goals are in alignment with the district goal, and that wherever we might be on a continuum with, let's say, behavior, we're going to set for 100 days. We're going to pick a couple action steps that we know are going to have a huge effect on student outcomes, and we are going to target those, and we are going to commit to getting that work done. While the work is being done, we're going to monitor that work. We're going to collect some data, and we're going to revise and adjust if we need to. That then informs the next 100 days, and then the next 100 days, and hopefully by that time we've met those bigger goals. So very deliberate about what we are working on, based on data, based on research, based on what we're seeing happening right in front of us. So those 100-day plans are guided by 3 foundational questions. We sit down and we say, how do we want to be a better school and district in the next 100 days? Not necessarily what are we doing that works, and oftentimes I coach teachers not to include things we're already doing, because that goes back to Einstein, doing the same thing and getting the same results. What can we do differently that closes those gaps with students and moves our proficiency rates higher? What targeted action do you plan on taking? Again, as we learn and grow, we can try new strategies. As we learn about kids, we find that those strategies are beneficial where we hadn't done them before. And then what's that measure evidence that we're going to use to assess your impact? Always measuring, along the way, progress monitoring, what we've tried, shifting if it's not working, trying something else, and having that data to prove that it was successful and had an impact.
And this was our second year doing the 100-day plan integration. So I had said that we tried to get into SAIL. And then when Allie and I had a conversation with Joe Schrader, who kind of leads a lot of this, he said to us, well, a baby step for you to start with is integrating 100-day plans. And so we started that last year, and people found that to be very valuable too. Like, you can pencil something in maybe for the second 100-day plans, but let's really focus on this 100 days. Let's see where we go, and then move on to the second and the third. So this will be our second year in that process.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the process we've used this year, but we also want to share our results with you from this previous year. So you should have access to all of the building documents here that outline the results in the areas of literacy, math, SEL, and the 4 Cs, as well as the district improvement results. And then each building is going to get into some celebrations and some continued areas for growth based on their own plans. So,
can I ask you a question for each of the buildings, and specifically at the elementary level? The way it's presented, each one appears to be its own silo because it's a different presentation. And so on the face of it, then looking at them, I was wondering, are they analyzed the same? Are you giving me the same information as the data? Are you comparing apples to apples? So if I took first grade at Fairview and looked at first grade at Glenbrook, am I seeing the same thing? And on the face of it, it's difficult to decipher. Can we kind of go to that umbrella approach and that universal approach that we've just talked about with 3D and make sure that all of the districts are presenting the information the same way so that we can look at buildings and grade levels across the district?
I think we certainly can.
I think there's a couple of things that we can try to get similar. The only thing is that based on their data, their goal might be a little bit different. And so that might be why they're reporting it out a little bit different. However, like I sat with Jennifer today and on the one she asked me with, I had to go back to the principal's SLO and read the narrative because even I had a hard time. When she opened it up, she's like, what's this number, what's this number? I'm like, I'm going to guess. And then I said, just wait, if you let me go open up their progress report, I know they have it typed in. And then sure enough, we read through it and we were like, yep, this means it's their low-risk career pathway, or their college pathway. This was their typical aggressive growth. This was their, so we can do some cleanup on the actual reporting so it makes more sense.
Well, especially since one of our goals is tied to the math and literacy, that's the first goal that you guys presented. So if that information can then be comparable across the district, that'd be helpful to know where we are in meeting that goal.
And I don't know if you took a look at the district improvement plan results and looked at that spreadsheet that's in that first section of that. That looks only at our district goal, and it does have by building and then the overall percentages for our district goal. Now, individually, whatever goal they set at the building level, that's where it could look a little different. So that's there.
Okay.
So you could look at that.
But we can work on that. That it's more clarity to it, so it makes sense for the general public.
Thank you.
All right, so some celebrations from Fairview is that we reduced the percentage of students identified at high risk on the FastBridge assessment from 24% to 18% in ELA and then 16 to 13 in math. Another celebration was that we implemented strategies so that all of our students who were identified as high risk for emotional behaviors were intervened with. And then the last one up there is just that 100% of our teachers taught a minimum of 3 different digital resources for students to be able to create and then demonstrate a connection to their learning through technology. And then areas for growth, we always want to continue to increase that percentage of students showing typical or aggressive growth in literacy and math, as well as showing proficiency on all of the grade level power standards. And then the other area for growth is to reduce overall behavioral incidences and then close that gap between males and females just by being consistent in our school-wide and classroom approaches with our expectations.
So, Nikki, you gave us power standard results. I think you were the only elementary that did that. So we develop power standards, right? Like as a team, you guys do that, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that's across the district.
Okay,
Yep.
so you just are the only one who provided it, so I just want to talk through it. So when we look at mid-year math power standards versus end-of-year power standards, we have like 3rd grade that was only at 15% achieved these power standards. So when we look at those 4 questions you guys keep talking about, what do we want students to know? How will we know when they know it? So are the power standards wrong? Are we not teaching right? Like those are standards we set that we committed to, but we're not. Where's the disconnect in those questions?
I think like if you look at my data, for example, like the mid-year power standards, my teachers all year long were filling out a tracking sheet of every single power standard and were the kids meeting those power standards throughout the year. So I looked in January and some of those power standards may not have been taught yet at that point, so that data probably is a bit skewed compared to the end of the year. And the way we wrote our goal was that all students would be proficient in all of the power standards. So like when you see our numbers like kindergarten, for example, in reading, 79% of them were proficient in every single power standard. But there might have been, which is 11 out of 14 kids, right? So those other 3 may have just missed 1 power standard. And they may not have missed it by much. So I don't know if we would continue on with this same kind of goal because I think it is kind of deceiving. But at the same time, when I talk with my teachers, yeah, we're guaranteeing that every single one of our kids is gonna know those power standards. So what are we doing when they don't know it, and that's really where intervention comes in. Our LST at Fairview this last year really worked closely with each grade level teacher and pushed in for intervention. So her and the teacher sat and looked at specific learning targets around those power standards and intervened where the gaps were, which I think helped to somewhat close the gap, but I think we can get tighter on that yet too.
So the other elementary principals, can you guys, would your numbers look similar? Do you have those type of numbers, or are you guys closer to that 100% on power standards? Do you see what I'm seeing?
No, I wasn't looking,
Okay.
but I guess, you know, in Nikki's defense with what she's explaining, a lot of proficiency is observed in the classroom as the students are learning. And one of the variables that we often struggle with is when they come to the test, they don't perform the same. So now we're reporting numbers that might not quite be consistent with what we're experiencing. We have a student who's fluent and as a reader right in front of us daily, but can't transfer that to a test because of anxiety or the wording on the test or what have you. So
Are these power standards tests that you guys have developed, or what is that? So it's a test?
We do assess. No, the power standards are those essential skills that we want kids to know and be able to do that are transferable into life. We've decided this is what we're going to hang our hat on. And so we instruct, we give them time to practice learning those, and we assess those skills. But there's a lot of variables, you know, which we're trying to clean up, and we're trying to bring consistency into the classroom. We're trying to, you know, build capacity in our teachers to be highly effective and try different strategies. Plus our tier 2, our tier 3, how do we intervene on the kids that didn't learn that one size fits all kind of a thing? So yes, the power standards are important, but there's so many variables that we're trying to reduce or eliminate to get kids to be where they need to be. So all of our numbers are going to look a little bit different.
So for example, in math, we have a folder by each grade level that has the assessments that the teachers came together and created. And so then there's consistently using those assessments to measure their power standards as well as the other standards and where kids are at. But you know, they just redid math in April and May. I think we brought the team together, and then they came back and they did math fact proficiency in June. So that's consistent across the district. And ELA, we're working towards that because of our resource that will be in its second year. And you know, different people like different parts of that assessment. Some like the weekly, some like the module assessment, and so we're trying to
clean that up,
what they all want, but to be consistent on this is the measurement, this is the tool that all 15 first grade teachers are using to say whether their kids achieve that power standard.
But is there gonna be any room for the teachers to give feedback? I mean, so that's the struggle with like shooting for a number, right? It's like the behavior thing, you know, if we're only shooting for a number and we hit that number, did we really achieve something, right? So giving the teachers the opportunity to do that visual assessment and put a value on that, I think is important. I mean,
It is, yeah. There's always a performance component, or should be, to an assessment. I think the numbers are important. It kind of guides our work, but as you know, each child is different. They learn different at a different pace, and as we learn about what makes an effective instructor, an educator, we learn that kids learn differently, and we have to personalize and differentiate our instruction. We have to create a universal program where we're not doing a one-size-fits-all, but we have a number of different approaches that's getting most of the kids in how they learn, a visual, a kinesthetic, a auditory. And we're learning that, and we're making those shifts, so now we're just naturally through instruction and understanding how kids learn and how a boy is different than a girl, we're naturally going to work toward that number. But I think setting those numerical goals is essential because it's really the roadmap, you know, where we're trying to head.
Agreed.
I think one of the things too that I think we all believe in, and Curtis had talked about how EduClimber, and you see the face, and there's, you know, Johnny or Sally. What's important is we triangulate, or, you know, we look at all sorts of data points. So based on this assessment or this power standard, this student might be getting a 2 because they're still working towards it, they
Right.
haven't got it. But the story might be, we're celebrating that 2 because that 6th grader came into school with a 4th grade reading level and now made a 1.5 year growth, and they're at 5.5 years of, you know, their reading level. So yeah, they're not reading yet at the 6th grade level, but holy cow, look at the growth piece. So I think that's why we tie growth into it, we tie, you know, we bring all sorts of things to the table that paint the picture of that student versus on this power standard, they're here, well, what's the bigger picture?
Right.
Yeah, I think to Jen's point, as long as we're consistent, then it's gonna be easy to decipher, you know, where we're really at.
But those assessments are consistent building to building.
Yes.
They all look the
Yes.
same, they all have the same building.
Correct.
Or the same power standards, okay.
Correct.
But not something that we're consistent enough that we can hang our hat on the results we're getting right now. It sounds like we have some cleaning up to do.
Yeah.
Because when I look at this, it's like, okay, we committed to 100 and we got to 27. So when I say, I overanalyze, so, thank you.
At a power standard too, there's a lot that goes into unpacking that, and what does that really look like in the classroom? And really thinking about what is proficiency, and then that's where that collaborative team comes into play as well, because if we're on a collaborative team, we have to have that same understanding of what proficiency is. So when we're looking for that in the classroom to see if kids have met that,
Yeah.
that's an important.
And then communicating that to the student,
Yeah.
here's the goal, here's what we want you to do, here's some examples of some really good work. Now, let's set some goals and help you work toward that. So we know that we need to get better at that and coach our teachers around that.
You know, Steve, you had asked the question, do we allow kids to show that and the teachers to see it? And I think Math Facts is a perfect example that it's an interview with the student rather than handing them a time test and watching the anxiety come out of, I have this time test in front of me. And then it's watching the student and the strategies that they use. Okay, am I doubling, am I doing the double? Am I subtracting it off? Or am I using my fingers? And some people will be like, well, that's not a good strategy. You can't, but it is. It's if they're counting on and I have 5, 6, 7. Okay, and now are they going to get efficient at that? And so, yes, the teachers get to see that, and we say to our teachers, it's your professional judgment of whether they got it. Because teachers will be like, you have to tell me, do they get 4 seconds or do they get 5 seconds to accomplish that? And we're like, no, you know, you see the kid solving it, and you know as a teacher, they've got this math fact. It just might take them a little bit longer. So, I mean, we laugh about it because even they said to us when we rolled out that committee had worked on it, they were like, we still don't know if it's 4 or 5 seconds. We're like, you're professionals. We trust your judgment.
For sure.
Some celebrations for Glenbrook. We had a significant increase in the percentage of our high-risk kids in both reading and math from winter and spring that we celebrated. The digital media varieties increased tremendously throughout. A lot of that, Sarah Malco did just a fantastic job meeting with all the classes. A lot of that with regards to digital media, it just happens to go with like getting kids to recognize the vocabulary. You know, what is a podcast and examples of, do you remember when we did this? Yep, that was a podcast. Okay. So when we ask the kids later, they're like, oh yeah, we did that. That was a podcast. So a lot of it was the vocabulary thing, but definitely digital as well. And then the big one, and I think a lot of us talked about that, I know I worked with Laura on that SEL goal, was that kids that said they needed help got help. Kids that were identified, either they identified themselves or their teachers identified them, they got help. And that's really what the big one for SEL is all about. We need to continue to make that growth in literacy and math. This year, we're focusing on Ames Web Plus. Talked a little bit with you guys with AGR about how I feel sometimes it is frustrating from teachers' perspectives where we're just figuring out how to use all the tools that Fastbridge had to offer, and then, oops, we're gonna move the goalpost on you a little bit. So we're waiting to find out a little bit more about Ames Web Plus. We did use it like years and years and years ago, but at any rate, we're hopeful that we're gonna be able to find lots of resources in there that are gonna help us continue with that growth along the way as well. And then, yeah, the office referrals, we talked already a little bit about that as well. So for ours, it's gonna specifically be that hands to self, and that will help us reach that goal.
And then for Hillcrest, took a little bit of different approach for the celebration for ELA and math. Instead of looking at Fastbridge, I kind of looked at 4 exams, so just 68% of our students were meeting or in the advanced category for ELA and 60% in math, which is higher than where we were at last year. Similar to what I think Nikki and Curtis shared with implementing strategies for those students that were identified as at risk. We intervened on all those students, whether it was the counselor, whether it was a behavior academy, whether it was the grade level teams, but we did provide interventions for those students. And then our 4Cs goal related to digital creation, all of our teachers did at least 4 different digital creations with our students. And then for areas of growth, again, continuing to look at meeting and exceeding that typical or aggressive growth is what we're looking at doing, getting more students, increasing that percentage. And then also continuing to look at reducing the behavior incidences, more so not so much the males versus females. I know that's a district goal, but one thing we talked about at our 3D vision and then the behavior academies is just being consistent. We have to be consistent across the board of, you know, what I expect in the hallway is the same as what every other teacher expects in the hallway for those behaviors. So we just talked about being consistent in the classroom and then all school settings.
At Lenoy, in our Tier 3, ideally we want about 0 to 5% of our student population to be getting those Tier 3 services. So a few years ago, I believe we were up 12, 13, 14%. And last year, we reduced our Tier 3 population to 6% in literacy and 2% in math. 59% of our students K-5 are proficient or advanced in literacy, and 77% are proficient or advanced in math. And a critical grade for predicting future success is that 3rd grade. And we had 1 3rd grade student who received Tier 3 support at the end of the year, and that was in math. On average, 78% of our students are proficient in reading and math in 3rd grade. And 71% of our educators participated in the behavior solutions training, which we continue to study and pull out nuggets to implement. Our areas of growth, we know that we can't just jump in and take action, that we need to take some time and research and study to become experts in a particular area. So we are going to continue with our PD in the area of number sense and oral language and phonics. And we are going to collect implementation data in literacy and math, where we tended to take action, wait till the end of the school year, look at the data. Obviously, that was too late. That's lagging data. So as we implement new process improvements or strategies, we're going to monitor how effective those are as we go and then make shifts. And then we're going to review and refine our work being done at the Tier 2 level now, that we're pretty much where we need to be at the Tier 3 level, and see if we can get those numbers where they need to be.
So end of year results, 1 child high risk.
In
That-
3rd grade, a
that's-
critical
that's
grade.
incredible.
And know that the 2 teachers that are at 3rd grade, when I first started 3 years ago, were afraid to have adults come in the classroom. They thought they were going to lose their jobs if they took a risk. They were very adverse to change, and now they are excelling beyond belief, and this data shows it. So now I've got to, how do we get that to spread? And they're having influences on their peers in the same hallway, and people are talking, and we celebrate publicly. So hopefully I know we all work in there, but they really did some pretty cool things with their kids. High engagement strategies for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
At Sunnyside, kudos to our teachers. They really worked hard this last year. Our scores were not where we wanted them to be, and they dug in, and one of the highlights was our 1st grade specifically. This stood out. 93% of our students in 1st grade made typical or aggressive growth, which is pretty incredible. What's even building on that in the PLC process today, in their collaborative meeting, they were spending time talking about, this is a new group of kids. So we did this last year. How do we build on this? How do we even take this further? And it was pretty cool just to hear their conversations and what they're already looking to do this year. Similar to Illinois, we had 5.86% of our students in literacy that needed a tier 3, and then 2.4 in the area of math. 100% of our students, again, report as being high risk, were intervened with throughout the year in a variety of ways. And then at the end, the area of the 4 Cs, we started here with 11% of our students that shared they utilized digital posters as a digital tool. And at the end of the year, we had 54% of our kids using it. We thought that was a big jump in an area that was our lowest to start the year, so we were pretty proud of that as well. Areas for growth, we continue to see that increase in proficiency across the power standards, kind of as you were talking about before. And then we've been spending a lot of time building that, reducing the numbers of office rules, but being consistent across school-wide classrooms, all settings, outside, inside. Our staff have been working with us. We're really working collaboratively to come up with some different strategies and consistencies across the building, and that's been very powerful. Some really good conversations, both at Behavior Solutions, but then at our beginning of the year staff meetings, the same thing. We're just continuing to build on that, those different pieces. And then in our 4 Cs area, just an area that we want to continue to expand is utilizing those various digital tools and seeing our kiddos using those in different ways, ways that maybe they haven't even thought of or are looking to expand their knowledge base.
At the middle school, Brenda and I shared 4 different celebrations based on the goal areas from last year. We worked with Amy and our teachers and our digital learning specialist. We wanted to have kids showcase learning in different ways than we've had, more consistently, using videos and podcasts. If you get a chance, click on that link for the Padlet. There are some just really neat examples of how kids showcase learning in every single grade level core class and specialist area. They'll get some smiles on your face. So we met that goal. The next 3, we certainly want 100% on all these, so I'll preface my comments with that. SEL, we had 23 students at the high risk level. 13 of those kids, based on their own growth and the work of our staff with those kiddos, fell off of that category of being high risk, and our overall number went down from the total from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. However, we want that to be 100%, so that we just got to pick up from where we were and continue to move things forward. ELA, you can see where we had 83% of our high-risk kids show that typical or aggressive growth, 74% and that was focusing on a highlight of 8th grade in our math area. But again, the first area of growth on the top side of the column on the right, though, is not good enough. And we had, it ranged, if you looked at content and grade level, 45 to 74% of that, and we want that higher to 100% because we want all kids. Another area for us to grow is to use the data that we have. As we get into Ames Web Plus, that's been mentioned a few times, how will that new assessment help us? But kind of going back to the power standard pieces, there are lots of skills that lead up to those power standards. So are there specific areas of, comprehension that are helpful for this student to get better at? So we want to really become better at identifying those gaps for kids to help them learn, that'll help build their skills that will then affect that power standards and their assessments. And then going back to the Hattie's work is we want to, through our own professional development and staff meetings and those things, is increase our staff's knowledge on what are some universal, if we're at the large group or in our intervention times or enrichment times, that strategies that have the highest effect size. So really focusing on those things that were that 0.4 and over, that efficacy and engagement. That's been a word you're hearing a lot tonight too. So those are the areas that we want to grow in.
Okay, I would like to preface what's here on the slide with a few comments. The first one is, like Mark said, there were a lot of people working very hard in the building, and we need to recognize that. Secondly, one thing that's not here, and I need to explain this, on slide 26 are hyperlinks, right? To each building's data and then Lindsay's summary of the district data. And there's a discrepancy between the spring data at the high school and the spring data at the high school, on the high school page versus the district page. And so, another celebration was that we included students in the goal-setting process this year. So our English teachers and our math teachers worked with all of our freshmen and sophomores to talk about, here were your fall scores, here's typical growth, here's aggressive growth. What do you want to accomplish on your winter assessment? And again, what do you want to accomplish on your spring assessment? And so, and we know from Hattie's work that involving students in goal setting and monitoring of their own learning is important and powerful. So on the high school page, those percentages were the percentages of students that reached their goals. So kind of overshot some of those goals, okay? So the good news though, is when you look at the district page and you see the percentage of students that actually are at or above grade level, they're pretty decent numbers. And I think, okay, so along with that then, one thing, we had a meeting late spring looking at the Read 180 program and our accomplishments or the work of the students and staff that were involved in that program, and really just some amazing results where, when you take some of the most reluctant, struggling readers in the building and have them gain that confidence as readers by not only accomplishing a year's growth, which is typical, or, a year and a half, which is aggressive, but in some cases, like 2.8% growth, or year's growth. I mean, that was really amazing. Like a 100 lexile jump is normal. So some of these students had over a 200 lexile jump. So kudos to those students and the teachers that worked with them. Also, as others were saying, we had 4 goals: literacy, math, SEL, and 4 Cs as separate goals. In this year's plan, you'll see that the 4 Cs and SEL are embedded into the academic and behavioral goals. But in relation to those, and Brooke, as our AP, one of our APs there at the high school last year, led the committee that was working with our SEL, and it was a real celebration that from the start of the year to the end of the year, 51 fewer students said that they didn't have an adult with whom they connected in the building. So that was great to see. And then in relation to the 4 Cs, with the student utilization of focusing on podcasts, video development, and the digital posters, they wanted to increase those percentages by at least 10% of student respondents who said that they are doing those things in classes. And you see that 2 of them had, one was like 18%, one was 22.5%, the other one was just short of 10%. So, great work there. To what Pat said, all means all, and that's 100% of students. And so we're not at 100% for growth, and we're not at 100% in terms of achievement. And so that's where we really need to continue to grow. I will say, to Steve's point earlier about, this is really like a 5-year process in some of these things. So, we have a year's goal, 100-day cycles, 3 100-day cycles, and what are those action steps we're going to do to try to reach this year's goal. But I will say one thing we've identified at the high school is what I would characterize as a discrepancy between the theory of our Tier 2 and the actual implemented practice of our Tier 2, where our students during our staff during PLT time are working with students who need homework help and have questions about assignments and that kind of thing, but are also working with students who are back scheduled and need that additional support and maybe reteaching of grade level standards and having the time to do both. So one thing our guiding coalition is going to focus on this year is looking at that. We're digging back into our books and saying, okay, let's look at the RTI structure and what should really be happening with Tier 2, and how are we going to accomplish this if what we're doing right now isn't accomplishing that. So we're gonna take this year, we're not gonna see the results of that in our data for this year, but that's going to be implemented, whatever that change is going to be implemented for the 25-26 school year, and hopefully we'll see the fruits of that work in the future as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, with the structure you guys put in place, one would expect, starting in the middle school, you're gonna see the celebration box getting to be a whole slide, right? Because they're learning. But what I would be interested in seeing down the road is students that transfer into our district. How do they fit into this box, right? When because they're not part of this program that you guys have put into place over the years, just to see, you know, it's a data point. I think it'd be interesting.
So most of you had SEL data, I think you probably all had it in the actual results that we could open. So 23 high-risk kids at the middle school. Obviously, we're trying to do what we can in the building. If our kids are on that list of high risk when the survey comes back, are we aware?
You meaning board, you meaning parents?
As a parent.
At this point, I wouldn't say that we would call you and say your child is at risk. I think we would be conversing with you about, we noticed some things are struggling, and, you know, here are some interventions that we'd like to try, and, you know, involvement in, you know, different co-curricular activities. We haven't used the verbiage high risk.
Right.
But in the realm of, what we do every time is then we have this list, and as our school intervention team, we say, okay, what do we have in place? And what we found is, I won't say all because I'd be misspeaking it. However, we've had multiple conversations with the majority of the families, and there's always a couple that we haven't. So then that becomes our target of, okay, we gotta get involved with the families there, and what can we do in tying it together. So we don't say based on this screener, they are identified, but we're having the conversations without using that language.
So you have a relationship,
Yeah.
so there's a connection.
I could tell you that all 23 kids, we have tracked, what did we do with them universally? What did we do what did we do if they, you know, needed to proceed on to tier 3?
An important other piece of the SEL screener is also finding out if it is in fact what they wanted to
Yes.
communicate, because sometimes we have clickers who just click to get through the screener, and then when they were met with to discuss those results, they're like, oh, no, I didn't mean that at all, I'm fine, I didn't read it. So better to find out if that's really the case before alerting home. So usually the first step is to make sure that that is in fact a struggle that they're having.
Give me an example though, like, of what they would have at the end of clicking. So as a parent, I'm asking the question, right? So why wouldn't I wanna know? Even if it's not something to be alarmed with, why wouldn't we wanna inform parents?
We took it.
I guess I would say we do, we just don't use that vocabulary.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they are informed, we just don't say high risk.
Yeah, based on this survey, this is how they were, you know, because we want the kid not be honest in that, and if they're, once we're having those conversations, I think it's really about, you know, what are we gonna do about it versus this survey, and we just wanna make sure we're getting accurate data, so that's why I would say philosophically, we're cautious right or wrong. But I think, like, what we find, and I don't know about the elementary, is our kids seem to be really, they don't click like they might at a high school level as much, like, the ones that are there were like I said, a majority of they're in the mix of our conversations already. There's always one or two new ones that, you know, oh, okay, and that's just good for us to identify and then continue that process with them, so.
Yeah, I just remember when we talked about purposeful people, you know, a few meetings ago, that it really takes the parents' collaboration, this whole behavioral thing, right? So that's the only reason I asked the question. And I think too much information is probably not possible, but.
I think, you know, one of the things too that, not part of this, but we were just talking about, there's this post-it note right there, is we have a child at risk plan that practice that we put in place, and just about how, you know, based on those data points, you know, we've communicated with letters, and now we're starting the phone call part of setting up meetings for those folks based on attendance and progress related to state testing and, you know, all of those kind of things, so, or I shouldn't say state, I should say Fastbridge testing, transitioning to Ames Web. So I think it's an area for us to continue to get better to.
Because I think you guys can only take it so far, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, parents have to like support the situation. If not, it's gonna be like this tug of war match.
Yep.
And of course, the kids in the middle, right?
Correct.
And
I
I'm
think one
sure,
thing- oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, and I'm sure too, out of, those 23 students, maybe the parents are part of the problem too, that maybe they don't have a safe place to go home to, which is hard for any of us to think about, but there are those students, and we do have them in all of our schools. So I think being conscious of that, because they may not be honest on the next test if they get the call saying this, and now they just made a very unsafe environment more unsafe. So I can understand that too when it comes to high risk.
I think we have to read the situation and build that relationship with the student, build a relationship with the family, and make a decision based on that.
So as a student progresses through school, elementary level to middle school, how much of this data is shared between elementary and middle school?
It all comes with EduClimber,
Okay.
it all is
I'm
coming
gonna
forward.
put a plug in for EduClimber 2 again.
Well, got deep EduClimber.
You can see their face change.
I was gonna say, does the face change?
Making
Before it
mustaches
used to be a
and
Cume
beards.
folder that followed the kids that might
That's a
have
good
some
question.
data in, and like we've just had conversations, like we were collecting these folders, and then we're like, well, middle school doesn't want them because they have EduClimber, and so is this useful anymore to collect that data when it's in here?
One of the things, I'm gonna just jump in with the SEL piece of it, Lindsay has worked very hard. She is our EduClimber guru, and because it follows the children throughout their whole schooling, now we've developed, to be proactive, having some of those high-risk kids in small groups at the elementary level with their counselors. And then in EduClimber, there's this little thing that says small group intervention. That's gonna be with them so we know, hey, back in 3rd grade, they had a small group intervention for that specific SEL piece. So again, it's over-communicating not only with maybe you as parents, but also with the staff as they move forward too, so they know these are some things they might have struggled with along the way. This is what we've targeted, this is what we're gonna continue to work on moving forward too.
And I guess I apologize being a new person if this has been
I
all
don't have to
covered.
use that
Oh,
excuse
no.
anymore, I love it.
But, just a curiosity question, how far in advance in the beginning of the school year do teachers get access to this information and know what students they're getting?
What class list, you guys?
May.
When is that established?
May, well, Illinois, May.
May
June.
for
Every
elementary.
school might be a little bit different,
So,
but like our teams
But-
meet
we
with-
set our goals, right, and then we get our kids afterwards.
So the goal setting at the district level on 3D, and well, we do our district level goals, and then 3D is just at the building level. So we're looking at
Okay.
all the students that we're gonna have in the building, and we will know that at that time. They mentioned that we have a September 27th date, when this is rolled out at the building level. That's when our teachers get into the team level, and they set action steps that support the goals. And at that point, they have their students, and they know who they're gonna have, and they have gotten to know them a little bit. That's why it's kind of that September 27th date.
Something else
And
that
it's
we
also,
do.
oh, go ahead. As I say, and that date's also typically, I mean, now we're using Ames Web, so so take it for that, but we would have the results of, here's how those 30 kids, 25 kids in front of you performed in math and using the math and reading areas. Here's how they performed on September 15th. They've got that data so that as they're working in their collaborative teams in-house to help build what's coming next in their 100-day plans, it's with live data from the past and that September assessment. Not that everything falls within that one thing, it's the bigger picture, but that's part of the reason too, is we usually assess in the 2nd to 3rd week of September annually too.
Something to build on that, in the beginning few days of our school year, prior to the kids coming, we do a flashback, flash forward process. So 2nd grade will meet with 3rd grade, and 2nd grade meets with 1st grade, and then they have those conversations about all those kids. Hey, this is a student that struggled last year with friendships, help, just to have that heads up, so you're already front-loading and planning, going into the year when the kids arrive first day, they already have that, they know, okay, this is a student I may have to spend a little more time with, just connecting or building that relationship. This is a student that we know struggle with a specific power standard. And so that is a big part of our beginning of the year process. So we come into the year with that.
And we do that 5th and 6th and 8 to 9.
Yeah, so it still doesn't matter that they're jumping schools, it
Correct.
still
Yeah.
happens. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, jumping into the district results, which kind of summarizes all the different things you've heard from the different buildings. You can see our typical and aggressive growth for students that we tested in math and reading. So 64% hit that typical aggressive in math across the district using both those measures, and then 55% in reading. Another celebration for us would be just that reduction in high-risk students using the SEL screener. That's K-12. So there were only 2 grade levels that we had. We didn't see a decrease from fall to spring, but keep in mind, like, those might be different students than were identified in fall. So students have things come up throughout the year, so I don't think it's necessarily reflective of that. We didn't have students improve, it's just different kids may have come on that list in those 2 grade levels. 4C survey, one of the goals that we had when we came in at the beginning of last year was we needed to create a survey, or Amy and her team created a survey to get information about 4Cs so that they could set goals. So that came a little bit later in the process than usual, but you heard from the buildings, they set individual goals based on that data and were very successful in implementing them. So I would say that's a celebration district-wide. Areas for growth, I mean, the first thing you see, we've talked about Ames Web Plus a lot, so we gotta learn the reporting, we gotta learn the procedures, so that we can use that data to do all the great things that we've been talking about this evening. We definitely wanna continue to grow and increase the number of students that are meeting typical and aggressive growth, like we're not satisfied with these numbers, we wanna see that improve. And then lastly, Matt mentioned that we don't have a separate 4Cs goal. And we've had such great progress with that, we don't want to lose sight of it. So like, we've had a lot of opportunities and engagement with students in the 4Cs, and we just, I guess, want to maintain that even though it's not a separate goal for our district or at the building level, so.
I'll skip ahead so you can kind of see where we're heading in the future. So now I'm going to try to pronounce her last name because I tried it last year. But one of our English teachers at the high school, Laura, will be. I had to write it down last year, and I know it's so hard. But she will come in and share AP results with you. We worked on the memo just this last week, and we're very happy. Increased number of students taking tests, more tests being taken, and even more AP scholars and distinctions. So she'll get to share those specific numbers with you. And then as our local and state assessment data becomes available, and that means it gets unembargoed from the state, so they changed some things this year, so things have been delayed a little bit. As you know, normally you would have got your parent reports probably middle of August. We just got them last week, and so principals will be sending those out with a letter coming up by the middle of September. So then that means the state goes through and, you know, they clean up their data, they make sure it's in the format that they need, they unembargo it and tell us then that we can release it to the public. So that will happen when we are able to do it. So we're expecting November 6th and the 20th to be able to start to share local and state assessment data with you. So that will include Ames Web. I did share, you know, you've heard that it's new. We don't have to give that assessment this year as part of, or this fall as part of Act 20. However, we opted that we wanted a soft start, a slow roll. And we have talked to our teachers, like, if this is where to get familiar with it, this is where, you know, as you're on your iPad and you have to be checking the error that happened and what kind of error it was, let's do that now, and let's learn and make our mistakes now so that when it happens in January, you're familiar with it, you know what you're doing, and that's what we've continuously said to them. So we are going to give that assessment and not do Fast Bridge. So that's one thing that we'll share with you, as well as Forward Exam, ACT, ACT Aspire, and any other assessments that are in there as well. 4Cs, if we have some results for that too, and SEL. So we usually hit on all of those as part of those 2 presentations. And then December 4th, after you've kind of seen all of our data, these guys will be back to now dig into their building goals and their action plans that they worked on with their teams that they've continued to come back and refine. So you'll see the first and the second 100-day plans. Now, we take a little bit of a different approach on that, in that, you know, elementary, middle school, and high school will get together and they'll have a slide or 2 slides specifically on literacy. What are we focusing on? What are we doing? But you'll still have their action plans like you've had in the past. So, and you can kind of see what that template looks like. It was in this presentation. So if you're wondering, well, what is it different? It is different in terms of the milepost, but kind of that bottom section where they actually put their action goals and plans is similar. But you'll just see the first 100 days, and then you'll see the start of the second 100-day plans. So that will be in December, and then The school report cards, that the DPI issues, usually come out sometime in November, that it's released to us, so December 4th, Lindsay will share that update on our district report card as well as our school report cards. And that has multiple factors that go into play to determine that score. So, back to questions. I asked lots of questions during the presentation, but you might have some more for this team, so fire away and we'll answer them the best that we can.
Say thank you for putting all the time and effort into the goals and the work and the data, because I think we're really gonna see some great things come out of this year and future years to come. So I just wanna start off by just saying thank you for doing the hard work. And now we just got to teach our kids.
Right, that's it.
Yeah,
This
thank you all
thing
for
called
being here.
EduClimber.
Can you see a picture of this thing? That was good, thank you.
I think that another thing, just to kudos, and Lara, you mentioned this, but if you could see the room with our data, and it's been, and Ally, you referenced it too, the room of the number of people that were involved in our 3D day, and then to that behavior solutions. I mean, Brenda and I were talking about it between the two, and they weren't necessarily the exact same groups for us at the middle school. We had a team and then another team, and there was some overlap, but we had probably half of our people that were a part of building what we're doing moving forward. So come like the beginning of this school year and then September 27th, it's like, well, half the people are part of developing it, so now it's just getting everybody else kind of caught up to speed and all that. I would guess the other buildings were similar to that too. You know,
I think the thing that we also did was, coming off of 3D, we didn't take anything down off of the walls that the teams had worked on, because one of those goals was behavior. And so then the next day when the Hannigans, our presenters, the husband and wife team, came in, they were checking it out and they're like, wow, like this is great work. But then we would see our teams going up, so potentially some same members, potentially different members, going back up to their boards and looking at it, and you knew that there were some conversations and tweaking happening from the day before based on the things that they had learned and met with their teams that time. And so then we took it down after that, but you know, they captured pictures, so you'll kind of see some of that work in when they roll out their plans to you in December.
So you said this, Jenny, you said this is the second year of doing the 100-day plan thing, right?
Yep.
Have we committed, like, how many years we're gonna stick with this? Have we set a strategy, like, for 5 years, we're not gonna adjust even if the next flavor of the day comes out, so we can really build a good data set for ourselves?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're pretty committed to that. You know, there's a great book on 100-day planning. Ally and I had read it a couple years ago by Doug Reeves and Bob Eaker, who is one of the fathers of professional learning communities. And there, you know, all of people said, oh, it takes 5 to 7 years to truly, you know, make an impact. Well, they disagreed with that. They said, no, you do this in 100-day increments, you're going to see improvement in a year. And, you know, so that is the philosophy of SAIL. That's, you know, the philosophy of even our CISA promotes 100-day plans as well. So I think we are committed to that. If we can take it in smaller chunks and we do less is more, and we really focus on 2 goals and really hone in on them and have the clarity, that we are going to see the results in all of the areas that we need to see. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we set a percentage, right, in the goals, but as the data comes out, I mean, if there's a need for a conversation, I think we just need to be open to having that. Again, because we don't know what we're gonna see yet, right? As long as we can explain things, right, I think it makes sense to talk about it.
And I think you heard Ally say it, we think we're going to see an increase in incidents this year, because our teams have made a commitment to really define what's a major, what's a minor, or that language might change, but really had some conversations around it, and then what the expectations and the reteaching, and so yeah, it's probably going to go up, and I think we realize that and we understand that, but then the next year, hopefully we see the benefit of the work that we did this year.
You'd even think maybe the second 100-day plan, like behaviors, if it spikes now at the beginning of the year, it should just start tailing off as kids get used to like, okay, I guess they're not messing around anymore.
Consistency too, you know, like I heard pretty much all the principals say, and I know Glenbrook was doing this last year with behaviors and how they, you know, help discipline or whatever word you wanna use, but if it's, you know, Miss A, well, she'll let me kind of jog in the hallway, but Miss B, nope. So now it's consistent everywhere. You're definitely gonna obviously see the rise in that number, but see the
It's also being
decrease.
consistent about how we're documenting it.
Mhm.
So that's important too, so.
Right.
And for the behavior, that will be way before 100 days, like that's something that Brooke and I will look at, like our incident report monthly and report that out to PBIS committee. This year, our PBIS committee is committed to be like actionable, where are the hot spots, what needs to be retaught, bringing it kind of back to the forefront. I know we got newsletters and other things that are gonna be where we're communicating with parents based on the survey as well, so, yeah, I'm excited about the work that we're gonna be doing, but hopefully it'll be, you know, a lot of communication, and I'm just very transparent about, like I said, what we're working on. Talking to 550 kids saying, we're gonna stop hitting each other, like on Friday, there's not a better audience, right? They heard one consistent message and stuff, so stuff like that, like we're excited about, but it all kind of comes together.
I just want to say that I'm glad we're focusing on behaviors, because I think I've met with most of the people in this room, and teachers and parents and SROs. I think behaviors is the one word that that has come to me over the 16 months I've been on the board. So I'm really happy that we're working on it. I think it's going to show great results in safety, academically, teacher retention across the board. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for getting that behavior solution. That was a big win. Whoever made that happen, I've heard overwhelming
I think it's going to help our
gratitude about
district a
that.
lot.
All right, any other questions? And we'll move on to the Future Ready report card.
All right, so Colton's going to put it up there, but there was a memo that kind of went along with it. And just to give you some background, so, you know, the state report card came out through the DPI, and when that came out, a lot of districts had conversations of like, this really focuses on a lot of academic and accountability things, and it doesn't really paint the picture of the great things that are happening in the district. And so I still remember being at a CISA meeting and this conversation happening, that these report cards were out, and at that time Plymouth, their director of teaching and learning, who happens to be a Pulaski grad, Dan Mella, said, you know what, we decided as a district that we're not going to let that be the only thing that paints our picture of our district. So we created our own type of report card. And so we looked at it, we had a committee of people come together, it represented a wide variety of people, and so we did this in 2017. I went back and I looked at the agenda, and we called it the Red Raider Report, and you have a link to it, and it was on our website, and one of our technicians who had left us that was kind of into the website, he helped us to create, and it was interactive bubbles, and you can see that it focused on we still did keep the academic excellence, and we felt, it's important that we have a lot of academic opportunities in the district, but then you see that we looked at some other things like community engagement, co-curricular excellence and opportunities. We wanted to really focus on innovative mindset and those 4 C skills, and then just exceptional staff. So I think it's still live, like on that document that you could click and you could kind of see what that committee came forward and wanted to celebrate. Well, then what happened is the CISA came out, and CISA 7 was kind of the pioneer of this across the state, and then even in the nation. They were out presenting and doing these workshops about redefining ready. So Lindsay with Aaron Adams at that time and Steve Linson, they went to those workshops, they came together, and you can see all of the components that one was going to focus on. They created one, they came back, and we all looked at it and we were like, that's a lot of academic stuff yet. And we were like, where are we really going to tell the story of what happens in our district? So last year in December, we brought together our counselors, activities directors, athletic directors, principals. It was mainly our 6-12 team. There were people from learning services or teaching and learning. I know Amy was there. we got together and we did some activities with them, and we said, what do we want to celebrate in this district? What really tells our story about the great things happening in the district? And they brainstormed tons of things, and then we started to group them together. And at the same time, we were somewhere and somebody had beyond the numbers was kind of, or by the numbers was their mantra of things that they looked at. And so then a subgroup came together and we started to pull some data and look at how we could tell not just our academic story, but other pieces of it as well. And it's went through tons of revisions. It's went back out to that committee probably 2 times, 3 times. It's been internally looked at, and so Colton, do you have it up? That this is kind of what we came up with, and Eric was our graphic designer on it and kind of putting it together. It's a draft. It's something that will change. Like today we met with 612 and we talked about we need a better way to really track volunteer hours of students as well as our adults. We need a better way to track booster club money that comes into the district. And so, you know, right now you might notice that there's X's there or there's hashtags because we're in the process of, was our number accurate or can we get a better number? And then for next year, can we have a better system? So you have, you know, kind of a mix of what we're calling our Future Ready report card. Some of it is, you know, our basic by the numbers. So you've got how many students and our square miles and staff members and the makeup of those. You've got if we have any Herb Cole winners, you've got Golden Apple winners, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, all of those different things. So we worked with HR, we worked with business, we worked with each of our building levels to help pull that data. And you can see, you know, yes, there is still the academic component. We thought something important to talk about was, you know, our kids have lots of advantages in leaving this district with numbers of credits that help them in advanced placement in college or in tech school. And so we put a number to it that, you know, based on that, we think that kids have earned $2,800 earned, and it saved tuition of about $500,000 or so. You can see scholarships. Over $2 million of scholarships go out to our students this last year that were presented. PACE is amazing, and the opportunities that are not only offered to our summer school students, but our other youth in terms of enrollment and our adult enrollment and adult classes. Kids involved in activities in athletics. The research says if a kid's involved in an activity, academically they're going to do really well, and they're just going to be more successful. Attendance plays into that. We're very proud of our youth apprenticeship, and you have to remember these numbers are based on, like, at a certain point when we collected it. So you might be like, well, we've talked about that we have more than 95 students. We do. It was about 147 last year, but that's based on this time of when this data was pulled. So as we update it each year, you'll see that as well. You can see the co-curriculars for both middle school and high school. That data that they just talked about for SEL, you see for grades 9 through 12 based on the survey, based on SABRS, which they mentioned, is in there. And then we kind of go back to some of the numbers. We have this many buses. This is how much they travel in our district. How many white buses? How many lunches and breakfasts are served? How much professional development happens in the district that our teachers either do on their own through self-directed, through Apple Core, which is an amazing program. You know, how many teachers are participating in that, taking advantage of it. And like I said, when you get to our volunteer support with PTOs and with booster clubs, we're still working on that, making sure it's accurate, and we'll get a number in there and then we'll continue to fine tune that. That next graph, we love from a standpoint that, and Mark shared this one time at a meeting with us at Learning Leaders or leadership team, and it was from a program that he was using that Southern Door used to have, Forecast 5.
Oh yeah, Forecast 5 pulls all the data.
So we went and we recreated it because we don't have that tool and it would cost money to do it. But Eric kind of designed this for us. And so you see the little radar guy? Based on what we spend per pupil, we have the second highest state report card. And then there's a school district above us. But then you can see these oranges and these yellows and these greens out there, and they're spending a heck of a lot more money on their students and their learning, but they're not getting the results that we're getting based on that. And so we were nice. We didn't identify those other schools because some people sitting around the table wanted to, it wasn't me. I think it was your partner. But I think our superintendent said, no, we're not doing that because I've got to sit around the table with the other superintendents and they aren't going to be happy if we advertise their scores and how much they spend on kids. So this is kind of, our first go at it, and we could include a heck of a lot more. We have a lot more on our data sheet, but there comes a point where there's probably too much, and so we tried to keep it to this amount.
Jenny, on the first page of information, what is meet expectations versus exceeds? What is that, what's the differentiator there?
That's in reference to the state report card.
Gotcha,
So,
okay. So this is gonna be used in conjunction with the state DPI report card, correct? This is just adding more color to it on.
This is telling our story, so we'll get it out. Eric has some ideas of what it might look like on the web versus a booklet like this. You'll see it in the annual meeting that some of this or all of this will be featured as they work on that. But it's just an opportunity to just talk more about rather than our state test scores.
Great marketing tool, looks good.
Can we send it to all the kids that open enroll out of the district?
Yeah. Make sure it's in their mailer.
Should we identify the schools on that one?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I like that.
Any additional questions from the board? All right, that wraps up the meeting then, unless we have anybody who wants to speak at the citizens forum. All right, next business meeting, September 18th, 2024, back at the district office. That's gonna be our annual meeting. So that'll go through the budget.
2 meetings.
2 meetings, so we have our meeting and then,
And there'll be a short recess in between, and then we'll conduct the regular business meeting.
okay. All right. Very good, thank you all for being here. Appreciate how much time you've spent getting ready and then presenting to us tonight. But that is all we have for now, let's adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Good night, everybody, thank you.